welcome to another episode of Piecing It Together, the podcast where we take a look at a new movie and try to figure out what movies inspired it. And today on the show, we are talking about Longlegs, the new horror film from Osgood Perkins, starring Maika Monroe and Nicolas Cage. And I am so excited to talk about this one. We have a great conversation coming up, some great puzzle pieces to get into. And joining me to talk about it, we've got Wil Williams, first time on the show. Always love getting new voices here on Piecing It Together. And yeah, that's coming up here in a second. Before we get to it, I do want to remind you, as always, to make sure you're subscribed to Piecing It Together, wherever it is that you're listening right now, or wherever your favorite podcast app is. You could also follow us on social media at Piecing Pod. And don't forget, we have a Facebook group, the Popcorn and Puzzle Pieces group, where we continue the conversation about all the movies we talk about here on the show. A really fun community of movie lovers to come join and have some great movie conversations. So come check it out. So with that said, let's get to our conversation about Longlegs. All right, Wil Williams is with us to talk about Longlegs. This is going to be a fun one to dig into. But first up, Wil, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm so excited. I love that you reached out to me just from a newsletter that I wrote, and it was so lovely. I'm sure that you've experienced this, but sometimes creating things online feels so like nobody is paying attention or listening or reading or anything.
Sure.
So that was just so lovely. It was so nice.
I totally get that feeling, and it is the best when listeners reach out to me, to either be on the show or, sending in puzzle pieces or whatever, or just telling me that they like the show. But yeah, I totally get that. And I feel like I've been subscribed to something of yours, whether it was like, you're writing on other sites or your newsletter or whatever, for pretty much as long as I've been podcasting. Your name has been out there. So I'm happy to finally, really talk to you and get you on an episode here. But you know what? Before we get into Longlegs, it is your first time on the show. Why don't you tell people a little about what you do and who you are?
Yeah. Okay. So I work in podcasting, and I kind of do all of it. So I have been a podcast listener since before podcasts were podcasts. I was like on RSS feeds from NPR downloading MP3s to my desktop computer. I got into the audio space in 2016, writing reviews and analysis and lists and best practices articles, and that wound up becoming my full-time gig. I was writing for myself, but I was also writing for places like the AV Club. I was writing for Spotify for Podcasters. I was writing for Polygon. I've done quite a few articles. And then I was the managing editor for a site called Discover Pods for a while. And now I am working at Tink Media, which is the best workplace on earth.
Nice.
We do podcast marketing. It's very collaborative and lovely. I never would have thought of myself as a marketing person, but the way that we do it is so human and special that it's just a real joy. And then I'm also a podcast creator. So I am the CEO of Hug House Productions. We make both fiction and nonfiction. Right now, some of our shows that we're releasing are Nevermorphed, which is me reading the Animorphs series for the first time.
There you go.
Those books are crazy.
They're bet.
Crazy. And then we also just dropped one called The Deposition, in which we read, it's a dramatic reading of the entire Elon Musk deposition in the libel lawsuit from Ben Brody, which sounds like it would be really boring, but it's funnier than anything I ever could have hoped to write, ever. It's unbelievable and hilarious. So making lots of fun things over there at Hug House as well.
Amazing. I'm going to have to check that show out, the Elon Musk one. That must be purely ridiculous. But,
it's absurd.
Back to Discover Pods, the first, I think, article about piecing it together was from Discover Pods. So shout out to Discover Pods. Shout out
to Discover Pods.
Absolutely. Well, let's get into this movie. I was really looking forward to this one. I was a big fan of Gretel and Hansel, which a lot of people were not that big on. And
I'm with you.
It was great. It was one of my favorite movies of 2020. And I'm kind of hot and cold on some of Osgood Perkins' other films, but like I was just super in on that movie, and I've been just dying to see what he would do next. And this, like, oh my God, did it deliver, first of all, on just how much I liked it, but also, who would have thought we're recording this the week after it's hit theaters? And I mean, it's kind of going to be the hit of the summer as far as budget to return is concerned.
Absolutely. I am so thrilled that we are in the midst of like horror summer between TV Glow, which I think is probably going to be my film of the year. I cannot fathom anything taking that place.
Yeah.
Saw Maxine, fine. Longlegs, and then we've got coming up Cuckoo. We've got Heretic. We've got so many more horror films. I'm so excited. And I totally agree. I think that this one is going to be like kind of the peak that we get. The buzz
Yeah.
has been great. People are loving it, which I am very surprised by, not because I didn't enjoy it. I did really enjoy it, but because this movie is bizarre,
It's
which
weird.
great for me, but I'm shocked people are loving it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it does have a C plus cinema score, which is not exactly great, but it's really strange because like apparently people are going in, they're telling the pollsters like, I don't know what the hell that was, and giving it a relatively bad review and then giving it good word of mouth because then all their friends show up. So I don't know. It's definitely having a strange rollout. It's going to be interesting to see how its long legs are over the coming weeks. But yeah, I don't know. I love this movie and I am super excited to get into it. So let's just start jumping in. What do you have for your first puzzle piece for Longlegs?
Can I actually start with one that's not quite a full puzzle piece, but I think is worth discussing?
Sure, why not?
I have never seen this, but there is a film called Daddy Longlegs, which
Mm,
stars Fred Astaire. Um, it is about a man who gives a charitable donation to an orphan girl when she's really small. She grows up and then unwittingly reunites with him
mm.
later in life, and they kind of form that connection again. It is romantic in this film. The reason I bring this up is because I had no clue why it was long legs, why he made the reference of like, oh, I'm wearing my long legs today. So the thing about Daddy Longlegs is it stars Fred Astaire, and Fred Astaire was in a film with Anthony Perkins,
Hmm.
who is Osgood Perkins' dad. This is Anthony
Sure.
Perkins from Psycho fame. So it seems like that is where the title comes from, which we do get a little bit in that plot, her having the experiences across her life, I'll say.
Sure. Absolutely. And we will get into spoilers here, so feel free to unpack anywhere you want. I read an interesting theory about the title. I'm
Ooh.
just gonna kind of just throw it out there just because I just think it's so great. But I was on some Google search I did, but some user in a forum. But we get those like cutaway shots of the snakes and
Yes.
those being like kind of like biblical, like satanic references or whatnot. And the idea that Nicolas Cage's character Longlegs is a physical manifestation of those snakes in a human form, and snakes don't have legs at all. It being just like a very tongue-in-cheek, dark humor kind of name for the character, and I just think that's great.
I think that's great too. I think that it puts a little bit too much importance on Longlegs the man, which I think we'll
Yeah.
get into. But I do think that is really interesting and a really great connection between that imagery.
Right on, right on. Well, we got Daddy Longlegs. We're going a little silly with that one. I love that. I think that's
Yeah.
great. Um, I'm going to go with an obvious one. Get it out of the way here.
Yeah.
Let's go with True Detective season 1, which I
Okay.
think is something that I keep seeing people reference, and I think there's a few obvious ones that will probably come up in this.
Oh
But I
yeah.
think that mix of the detective procedural with possibly supernatural elements, but we're never quite sure if they're just red herrings or if they are going to actually turn up to be the things that they seem to be, and the characters who always think they're getting like ahead of the mystery but then they end up 2 steps behind, like incredibly haunting visuals, really big ideas, and lots of layers that you can kind of interpret any of it as. And you could be right, you could be wrong. It's possible that multiple readings are the correct way to look at it. It's really kind of hard to tell. But I don't think there's anything that's really kind of nailed that mixture of the supernatural and the detective work like that first season of True Detective did. That's the first one I wanted to throw in here.
David, you gotta watch Twin Peaks.
Yeah, that's gonna be your next one.
It's
Yeah.
time. It's time. You gotta.
Yeah.
So I have never seen True Detective, and
Okay.
this gets into something that I think I should probably bring up pretty quickly here. I don't really like most media about serial killers. I don't really like procedurals. I had no clue what Longlegs was about before I went into it, and I'm very glad because I might have been a little bit more hesitant about it.
Mm-hmm.
That being said, I think that this is exactly what I wanted out of a serial killer story.
Sure.
So, jumping off of that, I think the next thing that I want to talk about here is another really obvious one, and it's the sort of collective works of David Fincher.
Mm-hmm.
I am going to say, first and foremost, Zodiac. I think that the parallels are really obvious.
Yeah.
I deeply respect David Fincher as an artist. I have never enjoyed a David Fincher film. I've tried so hard. I didn't even like Gone Girl, and by all accounts, like I should have. But I never get anything out of his films. And I think that part of it is because I also don't like true crime. I don't like anything that sort of makes this claim that criminal is a kind of person and not a kind of action. That there is like a specific type of person who is just destined to do things wrong and to be bad. And like this almost like hero worship of these figures really repulses me.
Yeah.
And what I saw so much of here in Longlegs and what Oz Perkins has talked about is kind of being in conversation with films like Fincher's, like Zodiac. So we have, in Longlegs, we have these montages of the main character piecing together this code that this criminal has put together. Very Zodiac, obviously. This is very much pulling from Zodiac Killer. What I love about this is that he just gives her the answer.
Yeah.
Just fully gives her the answer. There's no like outwitting. There's not even really an idea that Longlegs is this like absolute genius putting together a code. Once she has the solution, it's like a really simple algorithm. It's just like a letter-to-letter replacement.
Yeah.
And then instead of this killer being so cool and amazing and so brilliant, he's weird and lame and awkward and gross.
Sure. Yeah. I love that. I love that about it too. And we might as well just like wrap Silence of the Lambs in here with this, and in all these kinds of things, going True Detective, Zodiac, Silence of the Lambs, and Seven, I guess. Let's just throw them all in while we're at it. But I think we should kind of bunch them together because that's my favorite thing about this movie is that it does play with that idea of this detective who is so good that they're able to figure out, and see the signs that otherwise nobody else would have been seeing. But he's basically feeding it all to her and just laughing behind the scenes. And it's taking so much agency away from her in retrospect, which we don't realize as we're watching the movie until that's revealed. And I just think that's so interesting and unique of a story that on the surface could have just been, it's like Zodiac. It's like Seven. It's like Silence of the Lambs. Like that's what people would say going into it and not realizing, there's actually this other layer to it. And another thing, just like to that point, and it's really one of the interesting things about this movie is, you were talking about how he's just kind of like a loser and he doesn't actually have that ability to really kind of affect the situation in any way. I think the fact that nobody really is in control here is one of the most interesting things about the way this script was put together. He's not in control because he's clearly, under some kind of possession or demonic kind of thing. There's something going on. He's just some loser guy.
Deeply unwell.
Sure. At best, he doesn't know what the hell he's doing. The mom, who is incredible, Alicia Witt, Ruth Harker, who is doing all this stuff. She doesn't have control. She's stuck doing these killings for him because of this deal. Maika Monroe, as we're just talking about, her character Lee Harker, she's not in control. She's kind of being controlled without really realizing it. Nobody is in control whatsoever in this movie, and I think that really, there's so many layers to it that it really makes you want to like just kind of dive in and I can't wait to rewatch this, really.
Same. I was actually hoping to rewatch it before we recorded, but I didn't have the time. And I love that discussion of control. And I think all three of those characters, maybe not so much Lee, but everybody seems to think that they are in control. That they are the person who's making sure that everything is going just as planned, that it's all going fine. I guess even to some degree, Lee, though I think that she's just a bit more jaded, perhaps.
Mm-hmm.
The idea of control, I think, also plays into this rumination on David Fincher's works and the collective scary detective oeuvre. There's this idea of like this cat and mouse game with these serial killers, this back and forth of who's in control, who is playing the game, who's in charge. And I love that this breaks down to nobody is. At the end of the day, all of this could just stop mattering, and it's not sustainable. We see that it's not sustainable for anyone involved.
Yeah.
And I love the way that it ends just so sharp at like just the right moment to be like, yeah, anyway, so things are bad pretty much.
Yeah. The world's pretty scary, and the end. I love that about it too. It's very dark, as is all of Osgood Perkins' films, really, up until this point. So it'll be interesting to see.
I've been following his career since Black Coat's Daughter, which I absolutely love. It's my favorite by him to this day so far.
Nice.
I loved the concept of I am the pretty thing that lives in the house. But boy, I love a slow film, and that one even was dragging on for me.
Yeah, I don't fall asleep during movies very often, but we started it at like 11 p.m. and I actually fell asleep. And one of these days I'm going to revisit it. I'm sorry, Osgood Perkins. I'm sure you'll forgive me. But we just did kind of a big bundle of pieces here, so I'm not sure where we're at here. So let's just go to whatever your next piece is.
Yeah, so I'm going to pull one that I have not seen in discussion for this film at all, and I find so shocking. I want to pull on the Tim Curry It miniseries.
Okay.
So people are talking about the Nick Caginess of Nick Cage's performance here. I loved this performance. I am not like a big Nick Cage person. I know that he has this like fan base. I really only enjoy Nick Cage when he's doing something big and massive. I think that Moonstruck is a perfect film, and he was the perfect casting choice there.
It's the best.
It's the best movie. It's so good. I loved his performance here. And to me, this combination of like genuinely very funny and genuinely very scary harkens so much back to the Tim Curry Pennywise. There's this over-the-top hamminess. I mean, he's very literally a clown. This over-the-top hamminess, but I remember watching that miniseries far too young and genuinely being terrified by it, even knowing it was super funny. How did you feel about this performance here?
I love it. And, I was actually going to bring this up later, but I'll bring it up now just to go along, because I didn't even think of Pennywise, and that's such a good one to compare that performance to. I made a little kind of a bonus puzzle piece where I just listed off a few things that I think might have informed this performance here. And I think Pennywise belongs on that list, absolutely. I was also thinking of the Riddler, especially Paul Dano's the Riddler in the recent Batman movie.
Yes,
Buffalo
yes.
Bill, to bring it back to Silence of the Lambs.
Certainly.
Bruce Dickinson from Iron Maiden, as well as Ronnie James Dio. There's a lot of heavy metal in here. And then last but not least, Emo Phillips, which he is just the weirdest, most goofy guy. To bring it back to his UHF character, it just kind of that whole very strange affectation and the way he talks with his hands and his high voice. I thought of all this stuff in relation to this character, and I love it. I'm a big fan of Nick Cage, in a lot of his stuff, pretty much anything he does. And I think he is just pitch perfect here. And I imagine, with this movie doing as well as it has, a lot of people go in, they hear Nick Cage is so good, they have no idea what they're in for. And whether or not they get it or not is going to really, it's going to go either way for anybody walking into that theater.
Yeah, I love Emo Phillips. Very good pull. Every episode of Home Movies that he was on is like my favorite episode of Home Movies. He's so funny.
Oh yeah.
And then I think with that too, with like the high pitched voice and everything, I think we'd be remiss to not bring up Tiny Tim, who the maligned, disgraced, and I think notably, Predator, Tiny Tim. But I know that his look was informed by Tiny Tim's surgeries, trying to look beautiful, and how botched they were just given plastic surgery technology at the time. Yeah. Emo Phillips. I didn't even think of that. That's a great pull.
He's the best. He's so great.
He's so
but yeah,
funny. He's so bizarre.
Great character, and I think that it's built by combining a lot of very strange and disparate ideas and kinds of characters into one. And I love it. It's going to be one that we're going to continue to talk about for a long time here. But I will go on to, I actually want to bring it back to Osgood Perkins and bring up Gretel and Hansel as a puzzle piece here. I think there's this weird intersection between the supernatural and a kind of logical, grounded explanation for the supernatural that then is kind of pulled back to be like, nah, just kidding. It's just straight up evil, weird shit. And I think that's part of what I really loved about that movie. And I feel like maybe that's what a lot of people didn't like about that movie is it tried to ground it and then say, no, just kidding. It's actually like really weird and out there and just like any fairy tale. And I thought that was a beautifully interesting and weird way to look at a fairy tale. And I think that that's kind of what he's doing here, except for with a original story that, we haven't seen before.
Yeah, absolutely. I also really like Gretel and Hansel. I thought it was so funny. I don't know if you remember this, but when this film dropped, people were like, ugh, woke fairy tale, Gretel being the name first. And Osgood Perkins was like, Hansel and Gretel was already a film. Like we couldn't use that name. Calm down. Visually stunning film.
Oh yeah.
His eye for aesthetics and just creating a mood is so sharp. It's so precise. I think this is the one thing that Pretty Thing Who Lives in the House did really well, and perhaps was the only thing that that the movie had. But he's so good at just really putting you directly into a vibe. I totally agree about that. There's this idea in a lot of horror media, and especially a lot of like capital G Gothic media, that there's this interplay between, ooh, is it the supernatural or is somebody just seeing things, hallucinating? Are they crazy?
Sure.
Which I guess actually ties to my next thing, which is the works of Ari Aster, specifically Hereditary.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that I think is very funny is that Osgood Perkins has been interviewed by Letterboxd about the influences on this film, none of which informed mine. And you can tell because he directly said that he was not thinking of Hereditary when he made this film.
Oh, nice.
And to that I say, the subconscious is very strong here.
Yeah. Well, he did just say in an interview, too, that he just doesn't watch any contemporary horror films, and even kind of threw some shade at X and Pearl and Ty West in general.
Yeah.
But yeah, I feel like that's probably not true. He's probably just kind of
No.
playing that up a little bit.
Yeah, he has said that he did watch Hereditary and that he loved it and that he never wants to watch it again because it was such a horrific experience.
Nice.
Which great compliment. Great compliment for
Yeah.
Ari Aster there. There is this moment specifically that struck me as just such a Hereditary moment. Where Lee is in her house, her strange cabin domicile.
Beautifully shot cabin. It looks
Beautiful.
incredible.
Yeah, coolest light fixture of just like a shape.
Mm-hmm.
Amazing, beautiful. So
Oh, yeah.
she is hearing things around her and she is freaked out thinking that there is somebody in her house. She is going inside her house, around her house, and there's this moment where she looks out to kind of the woods around her from inside this cabin. And the light coming from inside her cabin is this beautiful, warm, yellow, orangish light that just sort of spills out onto the darkness outside. It spills out without having the strength to like really illuminate anything outside.
Mm-hmm.
That shot specifically was so reminiscent to me of so many shots in Hereditary that focus on the house and also the tree house, which
Yeah.
has some very specific moments of very specific lighting spilling into that darkness. And that also, there's something about modern interpretations of haunted houses that I really, really love lately, that sort of reflect a haunted house in a very different way. So here we have this like warm, beautiful, gorgeously shot, stunning home that she's in. But it is giving you the same feeling and using a lot of the same genre trappings as you would get in a typical haunted house film.
Sure.
Similarly, well, okay, I'll put that next just in case. But I guess returning to this idea of the supernatural and is it supernatural? Are they just crazy? What's going on? This is something else that Hereditary flirts with very directly. And
Sure.
I have seen a lot of conversations of like, oh, she was just crazy. Or like, oh, here's how you know. Here's the moment you know that she's not crazy. And my takeaway is always like, it's not real. It's a metaphor. It's not.
You
It's
got to
not
read into
happening
these
in
things a
real life.
bit. Yeah. Just a little
And
bit.
I love the way that he runs away with this here. Like, it is all sort of smoke and mirrors. It's all
Sure.
sort of like giving you one red herring that latches on to a next red herring to a next red herring that just
Yeah.
leaves you with the sense of like ambivalence and helplessness. And
Yeah.
I love that. I think it's just masterful work here.
Absolutely, absolutely. I was thinking about Hereditary as well, and I another thing just to add, because a lot of what you were just saying, I think is just perfect, and a lot of things that I was going to go over, but also the main character kind of having to answer for a decision made by a parent is
Yes.
something that
Yes.
also I think ties it back to that as well. And yeah, I haven't seen Hereditary since it first came out, and I feel like that, and to tie in the A24 filmmakers, The Witch is another movie that I haven't seen in basically since opening weekend, and I think this year I'm gonna have to rewatch both of them because they're both great, but it's
Yeah.
been way too long. But yeah, Hereditary, I was definitely thinking about. I'm just gonna jump right on top of Hereditary and talk
Yes.
about something that I'm sure inspired Hereditary, and that is Rosemary's Baby.
Oh,
Um,
certainly.
yeah, that definitely goes on this list as far as people conspiring with the devil or demonic forces for, for their own personal gains, and that setting everything in motion here. You get your bananas ending, your Hail Satans, and yeah, I mean, I think it's just in the ether here of like the exact kind of thing that Osgood Perkins is trying to do here. It's not a remake of some 70s horror movie or something, but it's trying to kind of swim in that same ether, trying to get into that exact same
Mm-hmm.
vibe as something like Rosemary's Baby.
Yeah, Rosemary's Baby. So I have a very strange relationship with horror in general. I am now a huge, huge horror person.
Hmm.
Hereditary. Hereditary is a comfort watch for me. I put it
Nice.
on pretty regularly and I just like chill out. I'm like blissed out, like, yes, yes, awful, let's go.
Yeah.
Um, Same with
It's the
The
lighting.
Witch. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
nice lights. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, I did not watch a lot of horror though until I got to college. And
Hmm.
then once I did, I was like in it. Rosemary's Baby I didn't see until I took a class on American Gothic literature and media, which was the coolest class ever. And seeing it is one of those things where like it just so many things clicked in my head immediately, so many references, so much
Yeah.
inspiration. Um it's really spectacular. Like now obviously Roman Polanski like bad.
Yeah.
Like obviously
Yeah.
bad. That
Yeah.
being said, I think it's pretty undeniable that Rosemary's Baby is like a modern masterpiece or just I
Sure.
guess a masterpiece. Um it is the satanic panic movie, sort of. It is
Yeah.
the religious horror movie to me. I think that a lot of people would say The Exorcist is
Hmm.
the religious horror movie. For me, Rosemary's Baby is like the cornerstone of that
Sure.
entire genre.
Yeah, absolutely. And they are right in that moment. And this movie, Longlegs, is clearly trying to like take it back to that era of the satanic panic and like that idea. And that's something that's just not around anymore. Like we've just moved past it. And, for better or worse, whatever you want to say, whoever, whatever your point of view is on that. But it was definitely in the ether when those movies just took over the public imagination. Throw The Omen in there as well while you're
Oh
at it,
yeah.
and and yeah, I think Rosemary's Baby though is you're right. It's probably the best of the bunch as far as kind of capturing that.
Yeah, there's also with Rosemary's Baby too, like the isolation of the woman. Um, though I think Rosemary is trying much more to like form connections than
Hmm.
Lee Harker is, that's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, let's go on to another piece. What do you got next?
Yeah, so next I want to talk about two things that are connected that I think one of them almost definitely did inform Longlegs. The other I think probably did not, but I think is worth discussing.
Okay.
And this is Dexter and the TV show Dexter and a
Okay.
film called The Night House. Um
Oh yeah.
so both of these pieces of media have a big focus on rooms that are covered in plastic and are in development essentially, which was the first kill, like one of the earliest scenes we see in Longlegs is them walking into this house with it's like a new development, it's covered in plastic, um and that is where Lee Harker's first partner is killed very suddenly.
Oh
um
yeah.
yeah, and then that's where really things start kicking off. So, going back to what I was saying about modern interpretations of a haunted house. In Dexter, for those who haven't seen, the whole premise is he's a cop and also a serial killer, et cetera, and he kills people in a room that is covered in plastic in almost this exact same way, though it's very clearly for the purpose of uh making for some easy cleanup
Yeah.
after
Keeping
doing a
it clean.
serial killing.
Yeah.
And then The Night House is a film that is largely about a house being built. So we get a lot of the interior with the plastic still up. The Night House is one of my favorite horror movies of the last couple of years. I would call it like
Hmm.
House of Leaves for sad women, which is everything I ever could have wanted. Uh, and I think there's this concept here of like, how to phrase. So there's the in progress nature of it, because that is the vibe that I got from this first house. Am I right? Or was he setting this up in like murder ways? It seemed like it was new house plastic to me, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure. It almost seemed, because also like this movie, it's very empty. Like there's just not a lot of people around ever, and so it almost seemed like it was like a model home in a way. Like it seemed like there was nothing going on there.
Yeah, it was very strange. So I almost at first thought that it was plastic up for murder cleanup in the Dexter way, but as I sat with it more, I wasn't sure.
Yeah.
But I like this idea of something in progress, something that is building. One, I think a fairly on-the-nose reading would be Lee Harker is literally already in the middle of something that is being built around her without her even knowing this.
Yeah.
There is something about the transparency of the plastic where you can see through things, but not quite. And then again, I think just going back to this sort of heroic concept of a serial killer. So Dexter, his whole thing is like, oh, I'm a cop, but I'm a serial killer. Ooh, it's gray morality, but I only kill the really bad guys. That's like the concept from the get-go. Things go off the rails pretty fast. But again, pulling back that idea of like what we are considering good guys and bad guys here, this is something that the film really muddles, whether it is, the cops doing this, who are like pretty frequently shown as like really desperately bad at their jobs throughout the film.
Sure.
And then the serial killer himself, and then getting to nuns and her mother. Just this takedown of what good and evil mean in this sort of categorized sense. That's a lot to extrapolate from a room was covered with plastic, but that's where I was.
I love it. Yeah. And I think that's, there's so much to chew on here, and whether or not, like, as you were talking about it, I was kind of starting to think about like, maybe everything has kind of like was being built, but now it's just kind of like paused, like, the American experience is kind of like on hold right now as everything kind of goes to shit. So like maybe it's like somewhere in there, but yeah, it's definitely something where you kind of have to see how you end up looking at it. Is it on its way up? Is it on its way down? And who is being affected by that? But the Night House was really good though. That's a good pull there. Yeah, and I actually have never watched Dexter, although it's come up on this show many times before. So one day I'll get to it. But
you don't have to.
Yeah, maybe not.
It's fine. Maybe watch like the first season.
Yeah. I got to get to Twin Peaks, though. You're right about that. But but not Dexter. I'm gonna go. Actually, The Night House is 2020. I think I'm gonna go to another 2020 movie. I'm gonna go with Lee Whannell's remake of The Invisible Man, which was way better than it had any right to be, starring Elizabeth Moss. But both that movie and this movie do an incredible job of playing with the frame and constantly making you think like you're not sure where your eyes should be fixated. Is there something in the shadows? Is there something in the corners of the rooms? A lot of this movie is shot, and usually this would almost be a criticism for a lot of other movies, but here it just works so well. But a lot of this movie is shot where everybody's in the center of the frame at almost every scene. But I think it's done very on purpose so that you don't know what might be on the other sides of the frame. And yeah, a lot of times that could feel kind of lazy. I feel like a lot of Marvel TV shows are shot that way, but here it really adds to the creepiness of it all. And yeah, The Invisible Man, that was like one of the best parts about that movie, is how at any moment the background could be, oh shit, I think I saw something. And I feel like Hereditary, to bring it back to that, did that really well as well. So I think that is just a really interesting kind of like super creepy addition to any horror movie, to be able to play with a frame that way.
Have you seen the I want to say like late 2000s, early 2010s Daniel Radcliffe, The Woman in Black?
I'm almost certain I saw that in the theater, but I don't remember it very well.
I'm the only person in the world who loves this film.
Yeah.
It seems like everybody who saw it doesn't remember it, and anybody who didn't see it has no care to. But for me, that movie does this thing the best. I think that
Wow.
that film laid a lot of the groundwork for Flanagan's Hill House, where you
Hmm.
have that same, like, when you go back and watch, there's ghosts everywhere.
I bet.
Like, you
I
and
bet.
you wouldn't know unless you're looking for it. It does that super well. And that was uh not knowing where to look in this film was so terrifying. That
Oh yeah.
entire um the entire sort of, I guess, chase scene in her house in the cabin, I was like constantly looking in the background, just being like, where certainly something is gonna pop up. And I don't think it ever did, but
I
I
don't
was
think it did
still
either.
terrified.
And it's crazy too because we haven't talked about this yet, but that first reveal of Nicolas Cage as Longlegs is so goddamn scary.
It's so
And
scary.
I mean, it's a jump scare, true and true, but it is so effective. And that moment in the opening of the film sets you up where, from that point forward, you have no idea what this film is capable of.
Yeah. 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 I love just how much Osgood Perkins is so good at using blueprints from a very specific type of thing, a very specific genre, a very specific execution, using that blueprint to drop you into a story that you think you know the trappings of, and then just
Hmm.
ripping it out from under you over and over and over again.
Yeah.
Um, back in back in that American Gothic class, my capstone project was on horror games.
Okay.
And one of the things that I wrote about was this game, Dear Esther, which is a
Oh,
quote
I've heard
unquote
of that.
walking simulator. You know Dear Esther? Ma'am,
I've heard of it. I have never played it though.
it's it's phenomenal. If
Hmm.
you are somebody who can abide, again, a quote unquote walking simulator, which I have issues with that name, but whatever. But there's this moment. All you can do in this game is walk slowly. That's it. And you are walking through these caves, and at one point you walk into a puddle of water, and you feel like, oh no, it's a video game, it's water, I don't know if I can swim, I'm gonna drown. Um, because your urge, if you are a gamer, is that you want to be able to swim and you want to be able to go quickly, and you only have so much stamina. Instead,
Hmm.
what happens is you fall through this water, and then you keep falling, and then you keep falling, and then you are underwater, but it's also a highway and the scene of a car crash. And all you can do is walk slowly through the wreckage of this car crash. And something about the subversion of the expectation of having the physical feeling like, I want character to run, or I guess I want character to swim fast.
Sure.
That was part of the scariest thing here and playing this game. And I think that in Longlegs, part of the scariest thing is you kind of psyching yourself out for, again, like, where to look in the frame, or what genre trapping is going to come next. Even the jump scares, they're so different from how I would, like, if I were to define a jump scare, I don't think that anything in this film would qualify except for maybe
Sure.
the, like, shots of snakes, but they work as jump scares. It's really inventive and so strange, and I love how much, I love how playfully he really turns things totally on their head.
Yeah.
I think that it makes for such an engaging experience and a very, very unique, specific horror experience.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we're in like a moment of horror right now. Like you said at the beginning, like there's a lot of great ones, but there's also just a lot quantity wise. And so
Yeah.
to get something that really plays with it that much is great. And yeah, as for Dear Esther, like I said, I haven't played it, but that just sounds like the kind of game that just really plays with the expectation of what a game even is. And it's always fun when
Mhm.
a game comes up as a puzzle piece here on the show. Like I do it myself sometimes once in a while. And I think there's probably other games that we could probably bring into the conversation, various like weird supernatural type stuff.
Oh yeah.
But I think bringing that one up is great. I will go with my last piece here, which So I was trying to think of a better puzzle piece for this, but I instead went in kind of a goofy direction here, which great way to close out such a serious movie. But um, I am going to go with the Peter Jackson cult classic, The Frighteners. And the reason I'm going with this is because in that movie, Michael J. Fox discovers that the Grim Reaper is the ghost of the serial killer, and his high school sweetheart is helping him commit murders. And there's got to be a closer analogy to what's happening here in Longlegs, but we do have this weird guy who's kind of demonic in nature or whatever, and this woman who's not necessarily in love with him, but has this strange relationship with him and is pulling off murders for him over all these years. So I think as far as structurally is concerned, it's there. It's certainly more of a Ghostbusters-esque horror comedy, goofy, fun movie, and a movie that I love, by the way. But I think that structure of the way that main character has somebody who's kind of helping him pull this off. And by the way, just to bring it back to Alicia Witt, one of the best performances of the year, as far as I'm concerned.
Astounding. Like, can we actually just real quick talk about the performances in this film, because they are tremendous. Like,
Oh yeah,
we talked about Cage. Yes, obviously he's good.
yeah,
Obviously.
sure.
Alicia Witt is so her performance is so upsetting. It's so
Yes.
deeply upsetting. It's
Yeah.
like, it's small and it's sad and it's frail, but it is also vicious and
Mm.
determined and protective, and she's so good. It's having her contrast with Cage specifically, I think, is so it makes both performances feel even better, because they both
Yeah,
feel like they are from the same universe, but they couldn't be more different.
sure.
Her performance is so subtle and so delicate, and his performance is so Nicolas Cage. And then Maika Monroe, she's so good in
She's
this.
great.
She's so funny. Like, she's
Hmm.
hilarious. Her timing
Yeah.
is great. And
Blair
then,
Underwood is also great, which
yes,
is definitely like kind of the smaller fourth role here, but it just absolutely makes a great character to play off of those funny moments from Maika Monroe, to play off
yeah.
of just the craziness of a lot of the rest of the movie, just to kind of ground it back down.
His performance is so, there's so much range in that role. He
Hmm.
feels so fully conceived. He feels definitely like the film's best connection to, like, normal people and, like,
Sure.
a
Yeah.
normal world. Him going from being drunk and a little, like, cocky and a little chill, a little too relaxed, in that bar with Lee at the very beginning when they're talking about the case, going from that to his, like, white knuckled, terrified, again, like, lack of power and lack of agency in that
Hmm.
last scene with his family. It's he pulls off both so naturally. At no moment did I feel the acting happening. I was just completely immersed. He's so good in this. The performances across the board in this are so good, down to the teenage girl who's like, "Dad, that creepy guy is back in the shop again," in, like, the
Yeah.
corner store. Like, everyone's so good.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Man, I am just like thinking, yeah, Blair Underwood is also just as good as the other three, and it
Yeah.
just really just makes for an incredible ensemble here. Wow. Well, what do you got for your next piece? You got any other pieces?
Yeah. I think, pulling on Alicia Witt here, I got to peer pressure you to watch Twin Peaks again. We got to talk about Twin
Yep.
Peaks.
Yep. We knew it was
Had to
coming.
be done.
Yep.
So, Twin Peaks, I think, was just like such a. I mean, it's a very clear influence on, like, any horror that's kind of weird and
Sure.
experimental, pretty much.
Yeah.
But there are some things that I think make it stand out as an influence pretty clearly. First, location. Twin Peaks is famously Pacific Northwest, takes place probably somewhere in Washington, filmed, I believe, in Vancouver, as most things in that area are. This same thing, I think that I caught a Washington license plate on one of the cars, and we get that like damp, bleak, gray dreariness.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's also something about Lee Harker's character, specifically the way that she is so awkward and so desperately uninterested in any human connection whatsoever. She just kind of feels like a David Lynch character to me at some points. She feels almost maybe a little, there's something a little Fargo-y about her, but I do think that there's something Twin Peaks here as well. I don't want to say too much here, but there is a character who I think also largely informs Longlegs the character. And then, of course, this back and forth interplay between, a police procedural and something that is supernatural. And where are the lines here? And I think in both cases, the supernatural, like I was saying with like that, yeah, it's not real, it's not happening in real life. The supernatural falls away to be more of a metaphor, more of a discussion. I actually get a little bit frustrated by the way that people talk about Twin Peaks sometimes, as though like it's just absurd purposelessly, when I watch it and it is very clearly to me about like the way that we conceptualize girls who are murdered and the parts of their stories that we want to talk about and the parts of their stories that we don't. And similarly here, I think that there are some like pretty clear metaphors for what is going on with the supernatural here. I think that it does come down to agency, but I also think that it comes down, and this is fairly explicit, but I think can be used to think about like real world things a bit more. The mother's dedication to doing things in secret to quote unquote protect her daughter, who obviously is still going to have to deal with these things that happened to her in her past. Like, there is an unwillingness to discuss. There is an unwillingness to even recognize or remember. There is a moment where Leah's trying to get more information from her mom about like what is going on here after she learns that she has already encountered this man in her past. And the mother says something to the effect of like, nothing is gone. It's all still there. You just have to like put the pieces together. Which I think one, again, lends itself to like the detective story, etc. But I think also it shows the kind of fracturing in memory that like really intense childhood trauma can have on somebody, where you have these like scraps of memories and you know that they're important, but you can't tell why. And Twin Peaks, I think, is very, very, very similar in that regard. Twin Peaks revolves around the death of a girl who's not there the entire show, and everybody's talking about it. And there's all these scraps about her life and what she went through, and kind of, for most people, a refusal to put those things together, and a refusal to see her life for what it was and understand the truth of what happened to her and why. I don't know. For me, when it comes to a lot of art in general, I think that when we see something that is itself a bit of a puzzle, a bit of a mystery, we focus so much on that we don't step back and consider like what that means, what it is trying to say. And I think that Longlegs is saying something really astute here. I think it's saying quite a few very astute things here.
Yeah, absolutely.
And like Twin Peaks, I think that is so much more important than trying to figure out just like the XYZ of like what happens and why.
Exactly. Yeah, the best movies are the ones where, yes, that's there. There's definitely a plot to follow, but then, what is the reason for this story existing, is, really where the fun starts and where you can really start to pick it apart. And of course, that's, any Lynch project is going to include that and a lot of the other greats. So, and yes, I will get to my my Twin Peaks marathon at some point. Really, I need an entire Lynch marathon. There's way too much Lynch that I haven't seen yet. And
same, actually. I just watched Mulholland Drive for the first time this weekend.
Nice.
Loved it, obviously, but Twin Peaks is fun. You are going to have a good time. Like Longlegs,
I can't wait.
It's funny as hell.
I can't wait. I was going to say also to the point, not really a puzzle piece because it literally just came out, but to the point of Lee Harker and her just disinterest in other people. I don't know if you've seen Sometimes I Think About Dying with Daisy Ridley.
No.
It just came out. It's really good. It's more of a drama comedy about this girl who she really just totally to herself, total introvert, really only cares about her work and does not want to interact with other people. And I thought about that a lot with this character. I thought that they definitely share a few qualities there, even though they're much different movies around the characters. But I think Twin Peaks is a perfect place to wrap up the puzzle pieces here. I'll read down the list of pieces we talked about, and then we'll get into some closing thoughts. We talked about Daddy Longlegs, True Detective, a bunch of David Fincher, including, of course, Zodiac and Seven, The Silence of the Lambs, It, a bunch of other stuff that might have influenced Nick Cage's performance along with It. Then Gretel and Hansel, Hereditary, Rosemary's Baby, Dexter and the Night House, The Invisible Man, Dear Esther, The Frighteners, and Twin Peaks. I think we got into a lot of weird stuff along the way. A lot of the ones that everyone keeps bringing up, and I think some interesting other ones too. Any closing thoughts? Anything that we didn't quite get into that you wanted to mention?
No, I think it was just another great entry into what Osgood Perkins is doing. I feel like more and more I'm seeing his vision kind of solidify, and I'm so curious about what he's gonna do next.
Apparently he's shot 2 films already.
What?
Yeah.
Dude.
It's insane. Yeah, The Monkey, and then I don't know what the other one's called. Yeah, it's crazy, but I can't wait.
I'm thrilled. I'm so spoiled with horror right now. It's really fantastic. I can't wait for what the rest of this season has in store for us.
Yeah, absolutely. I do want to put you on the spot real quick with a question.
Yes.
We get a bunch of shots, a comically number of shots of a picture of Bill Clinton to help make sure that we know it's the 90s. What's another picture they could have put on the wall that we'd be like, oh yeah, it's the 90s. We know when it is.
Michael Jordan.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, that would fit too. Yeah, but I just love that. It's so funny.
If I'm remembering correctly, so there's tons of shots of that huge picture of Clinton, which was very funny. And then at one point, she's in somebody else's office, I think, or somewhere else, and there's a huge picture of Reagan. And the crowd in the audience just busted up laughing, and I knew immediately it was because of the picture of Reagan.
I love that. That's great. Amazing. Well, I think that's a good place to wrap up Longlegs. Will, is there another movie you watched recently you'd like to recommend to our listeners?
Ooh, yeah, I'm gonna go with Mulholland Drive still. Should it be a recent film? Because this was
That's fine. Yeah, that's fine.
So good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great performances. Naomi Watts is amazing. It's really, really gay. So enjoy.
Yeah. Right on. Yeah, that's one I haven't seen since high school, but is going on the rewatch list when I get to my Lynch marathon. So for sure.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, Will, tell people where they could find you and everything you're up to.
Yeah, you can find me. I'm not really on socials anymore, which is so amazing. But you can find me.
Oh, that must be great.
It's so good. You can find me at hughouse.productions, which is where you can find all of the podcasts that I work on. And then you can find me on Substack, just at Wil Williams, where I write two newsletters for Tink Media. One is I sometimes help on Podcast the Newsletter. Every other week I write Podcast Marketing Magic. And then I also have my own newsletter called Podcast Promise, where I promise to only send you recommendations of podcasts that are so good that I can't not write about them.
Perfect. That is something that podcasts are very happy is out there. So yeah, thank you so much for doing the show, Will. Happy to finally have you here, and maybe we'll get you back again sometime.
Hopefully, I'd love to come back.
All right, so I hope you enjoyed that conversation about Longlegs. Thanks to Wil Williams for joining me on that one, and thank you to all of you for listening. If you're enjoying piecing it together, of course, make sure you are subscribed. We've got a lot of episodes on the way. Next week is our live show on Deadpool and Wolverine here in Las Vegas at Maya Cinemas. That's on July 25th. Hope to see you there. The tickets are like practically sold out, which is crazy. It's going to be such a fun show. And then I'll be announcing, well, we're definitely doing Alien Romulus in August back at Maya Cinemas. I should be announcing very soon my next show at Downtown Cinemas. So more live shows on the way, more episodes on the way. Of course, make sure you're subscribed wherever it is that you're listening. Maybe drop us a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts, Good Pod, Spotify, wherever it is that you're listening. That would be very much appreciated. Follow us on social media at Piecing Pod. Join the Facebook group Popcorn and Puzzle Pieces. And don't forget, we do have a Patreon. The Produced by David Rosen Patreon, where I post bonus and advanced content from Piecing It Together, Awesome Movie Year, and from my music career. I've got a lot of music stuff going up there in the coming weeks. I just dug up a bunch of demos that are maybe going to get worked on, maybe not. I'm not really sure yet, but one way or another, there's a lot more stuff hitting the Patreon very soon. So check it out. It's patreon.com/bydavidrosen. I really appreciate you being out there listening, but I also really appreciate you signing up for the Patreon because that's awesome. So speaking of my music, let's close this out with a piece of my music. And I don't have a specifically spider-y track to play. I was trying to think of all my albums of instrumental music if I have one. I don't think I do. So instead, I'm going to go to a different kind of bug and go with a song called Centipede from my first album, Echoes in the Dark, which came out back in 2013. This song's pretty creepy. Definitely fits the creepy vibe. So let's go with Centipede, and we'll be back with more Piecing It Together real soon.
An All Points West production, produced by David Rosen in Las Vegas.